Adding milk. We'll have the story. Although we're still in the heat of summer, Jim Bauer passes along some early frost warnings to producers, giving them a second chance at the market. And Glenn Gajownik has some weather conditions in China. It's all right here on today's edition of Ag Day.
Good morning. It's Thursday. This is Ag Day, and a special welcome to those viewers in Dayton, Ohio, watching on WTJC TV. In today's report, the European Economic Community plans to recognize cooperatives as an important part of their efforts to help third world countries develop their economies. The European Parliament passed a resolution citing the cooperatives as an instrument to be used as partners with the European governments. The cooperatives will be used to improve the standard of living in undeveloped countries. Bruce Thordarson, director of the Geneva International Cooperative Alliance, says the EC's use of their cooperatives is a big step to solving poverty. The USDA officials are denying that aflatoxin-tainted corn is being shipped to needy countries as food. The department says the corn is passing U.S. standards for aflatoxin corn, which is 20 parts per billion. All international shipments destined for human consumption is routinely tested for aflatoxin. The Federal Grain Inspection Service says all grain shipped must meet contractual specifications. It is possible for the grain to meet standards here and during the voyage have the aflatoxin spread to higher levels. Weather services of Massachusetts say the Midwest could have an early frost. Meteorologist Peter Levitt says the chances of an early frost are usually 1 in 20, but this year it's rated 1 in 3. The forecast is based on historical seasonal weather performances. This year matches that of 1967, when significant Midwestern crops were damaged by early frost. With the late planting, which occurred in some states, just cooler temperatures will string out the maturing of the crop for a late harvest. Well, it isn't only U.S. farmers who are asking for drought aid. The largest French farmers' union has asked the government for higher drought aid for farmers in southern France. That government is issuing 500 million francs in aid in the form of no-interest loans and direct aid to farmers who have been hit the hardest by the drought. The union says the drought is worse than the 1986 drought, and the financial aid is paltry compared to the 3.5 billion francs spent that year. The International Trade Commission has scheduled a vote on Monday to determine whether the Canadian pork industry is hurting the U.S. pork industry. A preliminary ruling was issued in July that the Canadian exports of processed, chilled, and frozen pork are harmful to U.S. hog producers and are subject to a countervailing duty. The Commission will report to the President, who will decide whether to keep the 3.6 cent per pound duty on Canadian pork. 4 major U.S. supermarkets confirmed they have imposed a temporary ban on milk from cows that have been treated with growth hormones, most specifically the hormone known as bovine somatropin. The stores involved are Kroger, Stop and Shop companies, Safeway stores, and Supermarkets General. Spokesmen for those stores say they are not making claims about the safety of the growth hormone. They simply are waiting for the FDA to determine the safety of the product. The FDA does not expect to rule on hormone until next year. And up next, a look at commodity futures. And Jim Bauer is here to analyze the sweet temptation of the sugar market. All when we return. As we turn to the markets, the grains remained in a defensive mode yesterday as rain is making the grain. The futures lacked incentive to take any direction in the marketplace and seem to be marking time until something happens to move the prices. Profit-taking in oil contracts from traders who were long contributed to the selling action in that pit. The futures trade in grains was light and choppy yesterday. Commercial buying supported wheat early in the session, with other interest limited by the weakness in the corn and soybean pit. Cash merchandisers were reporting only light movement in country grain. The grain that did move was done early before price protection was taken in the areas of heavy rain. Spring wheat sales remain light as Minnesota farmers concentrate on harvest. However, the Southwest sorghum basis bids declined due to recent rains that have improved crop prospects. The hard red winter wheat basis levels were mixed yesterday afternoon. They were pressured by direct lower Gulf bids in Southwest regions. Scattered movement of some grain was evident as elevators cleaned bins in anticipation of harvest. Hog futures settled near their highs as late commission house fund buying related to short covering boosted the bids. Cattle futures closed higher with cash-connected and commodity fund buying. Traders are looking for better demand to hit the cash market. Hog slaughter was 314,000, which is 1,000 more than a year ago. It's easy for hog producers to be confused about prices this time of year. The summer rally is still with us, but the fall decline is right around the corner. Prices are holding above last year despite more than plentiful supplies of the product. Hog packers are probably thinking beef product will be higher in September and October, so the other white meat should perk demand. Packers and producers had better keep an eye on the poultry competition, however. Cattle slaughter on Monday was 127,000, which is 1,000 less than a year ago. Buying interest was slack yesterday as packers looked at the CME U.S. feeder steer daily average cash price. It was at $85.17, which is down 14 from the previous quote. Prime lamb prices were at 65. Tom turkeys were offered at 70. And Jim Bauer is here today to offer us a few of his commodity comments. Jim, there has been some negative response to some recent rains. What is that about?
Well, yesterday, the market initially responded to the overnight rainfall, especially in the eastern two-thirds of Iowa, part of central Illinois, and Indiana. And the market actually got off to kind of a weak start, but by midday had recovered, and it actually traded higher on the day. And I thought yesterday's activity was interesting. I don't know how enlightening it was, but I think the market was saying, even though it did have a lower close, that there are some other factors now starting to filter back into the marketplace besides just rainfall or besides just the supply aspect of the equation. I think what's probably bothering the market right now as far as pressing it to the downside is further talk about the potential for an early frost, or more importantly, a damaging frost, especially in the eastern one half of the corn and bean belt. And I think that situation is being talked about a little bit more by some of the more prominent forecasters. Just 2 weeks ago, I think the odds were somewhere around 1 out of 5, but now they're talking 1 out of 3, which is a little bit dangerous for this type of year, especially with the crop being as late as it is. So I think that's the factor that's keeping the market on edge and certainly building in a certain amount of risk premium. Additionally, as we go into early fall, we're going to go certainly to a more consumptive type of market, as the supply equations almost worldwide are going to have already been built into the marketplace. And that's where paying close attention to what the market's actually doing on a daily basis through purchases and sales is quite important.
Jim, why has the sugar market firmed up here recently?
Well, the sugar market certainly isn't for the faint of heart. I've tried to strongly suggest that that market should only be traded through the use of options, as the volatility is quite high. I have been in sugar markets even more volatile than this, but as large as that contract is, I still think options are the way to go. But the reason is there seems to be Indian inquiry into relatively large-scale purchases that has to be borne out. And I think the recent sell-off has washed out a lot of the computer funds and that type of trading. and the open interest was quite high in that particular market. There does seem to be reasonable support around the 1235 to 1240 area basis, the March contract, and it'll be interesting to see if that holds. But there really isn't any real significant resistance until you go back up towards the 15-cent level. So I think overall we're still in a trading type market, but it should only be traded through the use of options.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Up next, a look at the weather, and with that report, here's Glenn.
Thanks, Bill. A cold front is bringing in some cooler temperatures to the Midwest. I'll take a look at those when Ag Day continues. Good morning. Cooler temperatures are now moving back into the Midwest. It was on the hot side and also on the humid side, but now a cold front is ushering in those cooler and also drier conditions across most of the Central Plains into the Midwest, extending actually down towards Oklahoma and also into Nebraska underneath mostly sunny skies. A few clouds are lingering back behind this cold front, which has now stalled out and is turned into a stationary front. A few scattered showers and thunderstorms will be found along this front. Fairly heavy rainfall amounts are going to be found from Arkansas extending eastward into Georgia. Some of those rainfall amounts will be between 3/4 of an inch to possibly an inch in some areas. And also the other thing we have to watch is another storm system, actually a fairly weak storm system though, moving in across the northern Rockies that will eventually be working its way into the Central Plains as we head into the weekend. Back behind this, some slightly cooler air and also a few scattered light rain showers. No moisture is feeding into this. However, as it moves across the Midwest, it could pick up some additional Gulf moisture. And at that time, we could be looking at some heavier showers and thunderstorms, but still that's off for about another 3 or 4 afternoons. Let's go up into the Northeast. A cold front is starting to fall apart. That's the reason for the broken cold front. Actually, some fairly pleasant conditions for most of the Northeast, partly sunny skies, and temperatures mainly in the 70s and also into the lower 80s. Low humidities, that's good news for the Northeast. However, down in the Southeast, on the southern end of the stationary front, very humid conditions continue. Temperatures in the 80s and also in the 90s. Heat indexes during the afternoon will be sitting right around 100 degrees. Scattered afternoon thunderstorms also will be found for North and South Carolina, extending westward into Arkansas and also the extreme northern portions of Louisiana. Back down in the Southwest, the hot temperatures continue, 90s and 100s underneath high pressure. And the cold front that we are watching up in the Northeast will slowly work its way across Montana and also across Wyoming, bringing a few scattered light rain showers. Actually, none of this is going to be on the heavy side, about 1/4 of an inch of rain, and only about a 30 to 40% area coverage for those scattered thunder showers. And as far as China has been shaping up, the late season rice crop overall is shaping up fairly well. However, it's turning a little dry. Excessive heat and also continued dry weather looks like it's going to continue now and persist for the remainder of this week and cause some minor problems for China. Now let's go to that forecast in your hometown. Hartford, Connecticut, 81. Chicago, 82. Indianapolis, Indiana, 85. Duluth, Minnesota, 72. And Omaha, Nebraska, 88. So we have 2 cold fronts, one around Montana that's allowing cooler temperatures to move into Idaho and also in western portions of Montana. Another one across the Midwest that's bringing cooler temperatures there. But the heat builds over the Central Plains. That will be in the Midwest during the weekend.
I think you're the only international weatherman I know.
That I know of, yeah.
Well, you're going everywhere with this weather.
It's interesting, yeah.
Late China rice.
Yes.
Have a good day.
You too.
On to the bigger picture, as if we didn't just have one. Last year's drought and this year's rains have taken the ag world for a spin. Now, where exactly are we economically? That's the question, the big question. We'll venture more into this issue when we return. With the whirlwind of events affecting agriculture in recent years, many of us are concerned over ag's effect on the economy. In today's Ag Focus, I talked with ag economist Chris Hurt about this issue and asked him for an update.
We're over the drought for the most part, and we're returning to a much more normal kind of a crop situation this year. The real question is just what is that yield going to be, and we've seen the USDA estimate for August already. It was on the low side. It surprised most all the analysts in the marketplace. So I think the real question now is just what is the dry weather, especially in the western corn belt, done to the crop? Are we going to get filled both on corn and soybeans? But it is a much better crop, much closer to normal.
Let's turn now to the bigger picture, because the drought was indeed an impressive fact of life. What about recovery to that subject?
Well, I think there's no question that for virtually every farmer that suffered from the drought last year, that's been the big issue on their mind, at least coming into the spring. Incomes were down about $4 to $5 billion nationally from the drought. What we're expecting this year is a major recovery from that. Overall, we look very good. In fact, we may have record net farm income this year out across the United States. Having said that, there's certainly going to be viewers out there that say, not on my farm. And I think we do know that there are problem areas, as we've mentioned. The wheat area in the plains, very low yields and some major problems there. Certainly the hog area as an enterprise not looking very strong at this particular point. But overall, it looks like we have recovered from the drought. The setbacks that many farmers suffered last year because of the drought in terms of financial aspects look like we're going to see improvement, and I think that's good.
What about interest rates? Can you share any thinking on that?
Well, I think just in the last week or 2 weeks here, we feel much more comfortable about the biggest concern in our general economy. That's been inflation rates. We've been very concerned that our inflation rate was moving along too fast and that the Federal Reserve would have to clamp down the money supply and drive interest rates higher to slow the economy down. The signs we have had most recently are that the economy has slowed down, and the signals we're getting is an easing of money supply and probably continuing somewhat lower interest rates on into the fall.
Can we then summarize by saying the word optimistic there?
I think we are optimistic there. We do not, time will tell on the general economy, but it appears that as the economists talk about, we're coming in for a soft landing. That is, we're getting our price increases under control. I think we'll have a slow growth in our economy, maybe 2 to 3%, slower than we have been, but it doesn't look like we're going to move to a recessionary economy, which we generally don't think is very positive for farmers.
In another area of concern, fuel usage is an expensive commodity, but ag engineers are taking strides to tighten up this process where it begins, in the tank. We'll see how come tomorrow. But today, there's more Ag Day coming up.
Over the past 30 years, farmers have switched from gasoline-powered tractors to diesel-powered tractors, and an experimental engine at the University of Illinois could reduce fuel usage by 20% or more. This is done with a computer and a continuously variable transmission.
That's our look at what's new. Coming up on the next edition of Ag Day.
Let's take a look at what's making news in agriculture today.
USDA scientists have taught cows some new tricks. The tall larkspur is a tasty but poisonous weed which cows eat. The plant kills as many as 2,000 cows per year in western states. Studies show that cows can be taught not to eat it during one season, and they will remember the lesson the next summer. 2 publications have been released by USDA to inform rural communities how to finance bridge and road building in their area. The publications are based on a 2-year study which details the various types of financing available through the USDA's Office of Transportation. The FFA is producing a new monthly video magazine which will be ready next month. The program is designed to give upbeat, exciting information on what's new in agriculture and FFA. Time is still available in the program for some public service announcements. The first show will air about September 23rd. That's the Ag Day Agribusiness Update for August 24th, 1989.
And that's our time for today. We thank you for yours. I'm Bill McCormick, wishing you a productive day.
For a free brochure on livestock and the option markets, call Bauer Trading, toll free at 1-800-533-8045.